who was a legit singer. In other words, the Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy show on Sunday had Nelson Eddy, who would sing a Handel aria followed by Shortening Bread for the Philistines. Jack Benny had Kenny Baker, who had started out as a legit singer. Eddie Cantor had Deanna Durbin and Bobby Breen. There was Frank Parker and Felix Knight and Lanny Ross. These were singers who had legitimate techniques. And then there was the Firestone Hour and the Telephone Hour, which would give you one pop number, two semi-classical numbers. That's a term that nobody uses anymore, you know. But semi-classical in the record business was Kostelanetz, Nelson Eddy, Victor Herbert.
What was your first record?
What else? Indian Love Call with Jeanette and Nelson.
And your second record?
Donkey Serenade with Alan Jones.
And
those were among the biggest selling records in the history of RCA.
And after that?
Well, I bought Juliet's Waltz Song because Jeanette had sung it in San Francisco. And what was interesting with the other side was Depuis le Jour, which she hadn't sung in San Francisco. But I liked that better than the waltz song. And then, so I bought the record by Dorothy Maynard, who was not a movie star, but she sang Depuis le Jour better than Jeanette. And this is the way most of us were turned on to classical music. Whereas you, yes. I think, Mike, I surmise that your mother had you listening to Bellini when you were 10. Is this true?
Well, something like that.
Because you are, this other thing is terra incognita for you.
Joe Pierce, how did you get started?
In many ways, I was worse off than Bob Conley. I grew up in New York City, but I was the child of unmusical parents, or at least parents who weren't interested in music. And the first classical music I heard was in the backgrounds of films, westerns and dramas and things like that. And I keep running back to see movies. I was the only kid in the theater who was running back to see the movies to hear the background music, trying to find out what it was. And as soon as I discovered what it was and discovered WQXR in New York, I was a happy 9-year-old. But when I came to opera, which was just a little bit later. It was originally because of a movie also, The Phantom of the Opera with Nelson Eddy and Susanna Foster. And then in 1951, when I saw The Great Caruso with Mario Lanza. And that same week, somehow or other, I managed to scrounge together $1.19, which was the cost of a Victor 10-inch record, $1.16 plus 3 cents tax in those days, and bought Vestula Juba.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Conley and Joe Pierce led me astray. I was under the understanding that their love for opera was born along with love for tonight's celebrity guest.
Well, if I can,
yes?
If I can add in there, what happened is, I remember the first 5 records I bought very clearly. The first was the Lanza record. The second was Jan Pierce's Bluebird of Happiness. And the numbers 3 to 5 were Memories of Caruso, which was an album that had come out that I inveigled my parents to buy
Wonderful,
for Christmas.
But what about our celebrity
the next record I bought was the Toast of New Orleans, which had the Madame Butterfly love duet and the Traviata Brindisi with Miss Malbin singing with Mario Lanza. So in effect, Elaine Malbin was the first soprano I ever owned a record by. And that goes back some.
Elaine Malbin, you made your town hall debut at 14.
Yes, that's correct.
In a full-scale recital, no less.
Mm-hmm.
However did that come to pass?
Well, it was an extraordinary feat, I must admit. When I had just started to study voice when I was 11 years old, which occurred because the music teacher in my Brooklyn public school heard me sing along with the other children in a music class, and she stopped at my desk and asked me why I didn't tell her I could sing, because I should be singing with the Glee Club. And I said, well, I didn't know that I could sing. She says, oh, yes, you have a lovely voice, and I'd like to speak to one or both of your parents. And my mother and father did go up to the school, PS 234, and this very lovely woman named Hortense Silkman spoke to my parents and told them I had this very unusual voice for such a little girl. I was exactly 10 years old. And she said, you might want to entertain the idea of giving your daughter singing lessons. So my parents were quite thrilled, especially my father. And within a year, he did find a voice teacher for me, a woman in Brooklyn, who taught one of the butchers to whom he sold meat. A girl took singing lessons from this woman named Hilma Otto, who lived right across the street from the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And I studied with her. I used to go on the subway with my mother at first, and then all alone to get off at Atlantic Avenue, and I'd have 1 or 2 singing lessons a week at the great sum of $1.50 a lesson. And my voice just grew leaps and bounds. And just by chance, Mrs. Otto went to a performance at the Academy of Music and sat near an old friend of hers from Berlin, a woman named Emmy Niklas, who was the daughter of a very famous teacher in Berlin named Niklas Kempner, who was the teacher of Frieda Hempel. And Emmy had become an agent, and she said to Mrs. Otto, do you have any very excellent clients whom I might be interested in? She said, yes. I have a little girl who at this time, I was 13 years old, had been studying with her for 2 years, and she said her name is Elaine Malbin, and I'd like you to hear her sing, which of course I did. And Emmy just went crazy for me, and it was Emmy Niklas who arranged for me to do this recital at Town Hall, and within that year, I coached with the famous Konrad von Boss, who was the accompanist to Helen Traubel. And here's a picture of me with Mr. Boss. It's too bad this is not TV, but there I am at age 14 at Town Hall with flowers and a bunny rabbit that was sitting on the piano. And actually, he was so adorable. During the intermission, when I received all these beautiful flowers, he said, Elaine, the bunny rabbit is backwards. And I remember it clearly as though it were yesterday, and it surely wasn't yesterday. And we turned the little rabbit around. And that's how it all came about. And it was I was so young that I really did not know what I was doing, but I did it. And I did it with a great deal of success and, of course, a lot of publicity, a lot of attention.
In the photo, you see a bright-eyed young thing who is smiling and all teeth. What stands out most, though, are the eyes, luminant. She looks as if she's having the time of her life. The flowers go up well above her head. At the keyboard is a dour-looking old gentleman, rather Prussian in manner, somehow.
Can I just say, I think Ms. Malbin knows this, but your listeners may not. This is how history is made in a way. Now, here's this young singer, Elaine Malbin, and she is appearing with Konrad von Boss. Konrad von Boss was the original accompanist on the first performances of Brahms songs in the 1890s.
Is that right?
Yeah, so you're another part of history.
Yes,
yeah.
Well, I am actually. When I told you about the woman who managed me for many years, actually, my career and my knowledge about voice goes back 3 generations older than I actually am, because here I was managed by the daughter of this great voice teacher from Berlin, who not only taught great opera singers, and we do know the name of Frieda Hempel, I'm sure, on this program, but she was also the teacher to royalty at the time. And amazing. And through Emmy, I met fantastic people who were certainly much older than I, of a different era. I used to go to parties at the home of the composer Emmerich Kallmann, where I met the great tenor Richard Tauber many times, not just once, but many times.
Well, obviously, we'll have to talk about that, but let me first ask about Town Hall. Did you sing a full-length solo recital?
Yes, I did. I'll tell you, I don't remember the entire program, but I started with O Had I Jubel's Lyre by Handel. I did another aria from Floridante by Handel. I did Widmung of Schumann and Der Nussbaum of Schumann. And as my arias, hold your hats, everyone, I sang Mi chiamano Mimi and Voi lo sapete from Cavalleria Rusticana. And I just happened to have a tape which I taped from one of my very earliest recordings on the radio, which was done with Joseph Stopak conducting on WJZ, I was about 15 when I did this aria, and of course it's a very simple recording, a monaural, of course, taped from an old 78.
Well, with that kind of introduction, here goes. Voi lo sapete, Elaine Malbin, soprano.
Age 15.
The number here, 212-854-5223, Opera Fanatic. So, Voi lo sapete, sung by our guest soprano Elaine Malbin at age 15. A remarkably mature-sounding 15-year-old. But why ever, of all pieces, Voi lo sapete, traditionally associated with mature singers?
That's exactly what Wilfred Pelletier said when he heard me sing this. When Emmy had me auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera auditions of the Air when I was 15 years old. And Edward Johnson was still the manager of the Met. And I went in and sang this aria, and Pelletier, who became very interested in me, came out of the, what is this, room here?
Studio?
Yeah, studio. And he said to me and to Emmy, "How can she understand what she's singing about? She's a baby." And they almost put me on the auditions of the Air, and then they decided I'm really too young, because if I was going to win, they wouldn't. At that time, you got a contract with the Met. But it was just, you know, I had this lovely quality in my voice, and I was never a coloratura soprano as a young girl. Probably because of the fact that my first voice teacher was a German woman, and they just developed this sound, and everyone thought that I would grow up to be a real dramatic soprano, which of course never did happen.
And yet, there was evidently a prejudice against you at the same time as arms were open toward you, the feeling that you were too young. Was that well-founded? Is there such a thing as being too young?
I can't answer that, Stefan. I had a lot of feeling in my singing. I think that all throughout my singing life, I did not have the best training. I had the big talent that people use one way or another, and but I think I would have been better off had I studied more, perhaps with a different type of a voice teacher when I was young.
You mentioned that you sang your town hall recital at 14,
right,
without really knowing what you were doing. And did your voice peter out by the concert's end?
No, my voice never petered out. Not at all. I had quite a big success. I got very good reviews, not completely, totally wonderful reviews. People said that I needed more training, but I had the material to be a great singer. But because I had this manager who was, I guess, exploiting me, and in some ways just getting me engagements, and I was able to do it all, and I wanted to do it, and I loved doing it. I just went on in my singing career, and of course this tape you just heard of the Voilo Sapete was one of many appearances that I did on the radio on WJZ at the time. I remember I sang with Norman Corden, the bass. He had a program. I sang a lot with Al Goodman, which eventually culminated into many records that I had made with him. And eventually, at the ripe old age of 16, I auditioned for the National Broadcasting Company. They were conducting a contest for someone to take over for the programs that Robert Merrill and Nan Merriman were doing. They were called the Sustaining Radio Shows, and I won that contest. In fact, the director who did my audition was Don Gillis. Do you know who Don Gillis was?
The name.
Don Gillis was the man who did all of the Toscanini broadcasts from Studio 8H. And when I walked into the studio at NBC and auditioned, he had the vice presidents of NBC tune into my audition, and I was hired on the spot.
One would think that NBC Radio would have had its pick of singers at the Met and everywhere else, yet they chose you. Are you aware, or were you aware of others also auditioning?
No. As a matter of fact, I think that eventually became a problem for me. I always got the job. And many, many years later, and we'll come to that, when I started getting rejected, it was impossible for me to take. I always got the job. I would say for certainly the first 12 or 13 years of my career. I don't think I can remember one job that I auditioned for and did not get.
New listeners, this place is not soundproof. We're hearing a concert leaking through in an adjacent auditorium, and we're hearing steam in the pipes of the building. You are not mistuned. Your equipment is not malfunctioning. So, at 16, no less, you were appearing on NBC.
3 times a week on a program. Well, one of them was called The Serenade to America. Another was called Music in the Air. Occasionally, I did sing with Robert Merrill, who was still on with NBC. He had just started his operatic career at the Met. Then Thomas Hayward, remember Tommy Hayward, sang with me on NBC. And at the same time, I was beginning to do appearances in operettas all over the country. Detroit, Dallas, St. Louis, the Muni Opera, and doing things with Al Goodman. And actually, the next tape I'd like you to play is a tape of me with a voice you will know. You'll recognize the voice.
Without further ado, Elaine Malbin, soprano.
But Dwight, I didn't discover the island, and I didn't discover the mountain range. The few discoveries I have made have usually been among people. I've written books about adventurous characters, soldiers of fortune. My latest discovery is along a different line. It's a lovely young lady.
I understand also she's a very fine singer.
That's quite true. One night, it was the first night that I had ever gotten to my studio ahead of time. I was listening to the program just in front of me, and there was the voice of a girl, and her voice was so charming that I decided to get acquainted with her, and I found that she was really something. Her name is Elaine Malbin. She's only 18 years old, and I'd like to have you meet her. Do I?
How do you do, Mr. Weeks?
Hello, Elaine.
Mr. Weeks, all my life I wanted to be a singer, and I've been studying music ever since I can remember. But one must study very hard, and no matter how hard you study, you have to have luck with you. And it was my lucky break when Mr. Thomas heard me sing, and I want him to know how grateful I am to him, and to thank him for making me a headline in the news, and for being a one-man brass band without my talent.
We understand, Elaine, that many New York critics share Lowell's opinion.
Thank you.
I'm sure that your audience on We the People will agree that Elaine is really a rising star, Dwight, and she's going to sing the Italian street song.
I'm batching listener phone calls, and we'll turn to them momentarily. We just heard Elaine Malbin in Italian Street Song.
Italian street song from Noti Marietta, isn't it? Is it?
Yes.
I've forgotten now.
You know, if I just may say, usually when you hear a singer that young, they may have a lovely quality, but they're kind of laid back, and you seem to have, right from the beginning, almost an aggressive singing style. I mean that in the best sense of the word, like
Well,
very sure.
I always sang with a lot of heart, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
I
you sure
never
did.
I never held back, and that was my forte, I would say.
Also, there's a slight vibrato, which
Yes,
to me is,
you're
which
right.
I love. I mean, this is the great
Well, that's a
controversial
very
thing.
interesting
But
comment.
it gives it character, makes it exciting.
Gives life to
You
the
see,
voice.
that is probably the quality now. I always had that, and you'll hear it now with the record with Lanza. I was no longer studying voice with anybody. When I was about a little past 16, I left that first singing teacher of mine.
Why was that?
I think I had comments that she was pushing me vocally. And, of course, my manager, who just wanted to protect me from the world. I think she didn't want to let anyone else into my life. She did not encourage me to go to anyone else because she didn't want anyone to spoil the quality that she loved in my voice. But sometimes when I would sing too much or too hard, I would get this very fast vibrato, which I really do. I hear it myself when I hear the records from Lanza, the Butterfly. But that really comes from stress. And now that I'm such an expert on voice, now that after my career, I finally learned how to sing. And I not only sing, but I teach. So I know I've gotten rid of that quick vibrato. But you're absolutely right. It does lend character to the voice and an individuality. But too much shows that there's too much pressure on the throat. And since I was singing naturally, I did not know what I was doing. I just did it.
Were you a goody two-shoes? What were you like as a person at that time?
As a little girl?
Yeah, your remarks there on the segment just heard suggested that you were a little too precious and good to be true.
I was never precious, but I was a very little goody-good two-shoes, actually, when I was a young girl. I was very shy. I was very quiet and quite dedicated to my singing for a while. However, I don't know whether I'm trying to do my music chronologically and in a biographical manner. I did find that I enjoyed the power that I seem to have achieved by my success in my singing career. And I want to had this manager, but I often would tell Emmy what to do. As a matter of fact, it was I who had suggested that I make that audition for NBC when I was just a teenager. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I remember I had read about a show called My Darling Aida, which was going into rehearsal at the Winter Garden Theater. This was a couple of years later. And I read that some soprano had been engaged for it. And I said to Emmy, why didn't I audition for it? And she says, well, it's too late now. They've got their soprano. And I said, well, why don't you call up and find out? And so she did. And guess what happened? I auditioned for the part, and I got the role, and the other soprano was out. So I did have this tremendous drive, which you will hear about in an interview that I had with Mike Wallace, which comes later on the tape that I brought with me today. But first, I'm about the time now where I did that Traviata.
May I back up and ask a few questions, actually? You had mentioned Kalman and you had mentioned Taubert.
Yes.
How did you get to know them?
I was brought to the home of Kalman, who lived on Park Avenue. I remember the address, 417 Park Avenue. And he and his beautiful wife, Vera, and Vera is still alive, and she lives in Europe, used to give fabulous parties. And Emmy used to bring me to their home, and I would get up and sing. And Taube was very frequently their guest, and he was a friend of Miss Nicholas, my manager. And he took me a little bit under his wing. And he used to say to me, don't only sing, of course, easier said than done, with the interest of your voice. Never seem to have heard that tune before. Don't sing with your capital. And they gave me some wonderful music to sing. As a matter of fact, if we discuss your bel canto concert in April, I'm going to do one of the pieces by Emery Kalman, which I learned, which is the entrance of Countess Maritza, which was written by Kalman. And then, because of my affiliation with Kalman, I learned a lot of Viennese music, and when I was still in my teens, I sang 5 Viennese pops concerts at Carnegie Hall and did fabulous Lehar music and Strauss and, of course, Emmerich Kalman.
Were you in school at this time?
Well, I was in high school. I finished high school when I was 17 years old. I doubled up in a couple of my subjects, and I attended and graduated from James Madison High School in New York. But straight out of Madison, I went right into the NBC as their singer.
Boyfriends?
No boyfriends.
Social life of any kind?
None.
Your life was ruled by music strictly?
Yes, by my singing, by voice, my career.
What about music studies apart from singing? Theory, piano?
Well,
keyboard harmony?
I have to say that in listening to my old tapes, that I am astounded now to see how musical I really was. My musical training came from my actual experience, and I had some wonderful coaches and conductors with whom I worked, but I did not go to any music school, and the only musical training I had was my piano lessons with Professor Leone. I don't know if he's still alive, but he taught me to play the piano. I studied with him for just 2 to 3 years at the most, and sight singing, and I could apply it. I mean, I have students now who have graduated from music conservatories, and they don't know as much about music as I.
Records, were you steeped in them?
Not at all. I was steeped only in my own career. But I will say I had some pretty interesting influences.
During that period, you did a good deal of Gilbert and Sullivan, didn't you?
Well, I wouldn't say a good bit. I did some. Actually, when I was 15, I played the role of Yum Yum in The Mikado at the Academy of Music.
It's not hard to imagine why.
Yeah,
Yum
I look like a Yum Yum.
Indeed.
Right. And then early in my career, I did appear at the Mark Hellinger Theater with Chertok, a man named Chertok. He produced a whole Gilbert and Sullivan season, and I played in Trial by Jury, and I did Josephine, and I also did one. I think I mentioned to you. What other one did I do?
Well, let me see.
The Pirates, the Mabel, the Pirates of Penzance, right?
And then came Traviata.
Yes, that was, of course, the real. Because I never had a problem having a career, but when I was 19 years old, I auditioned for Geraldine and Henry Sylvain, who were the producers of the Metropolitan Broadcasts of the Air, the Texaco, and they were about to produce one of the very first operas on television for CBS. I think they had already done Carmen, and they were looking for a Violetta, and every famous soprano at the time wanted that role because this was a very new thing. I have to mention some of the names: Albanese, Kirsten, Sayao, were the great divas of the time. And I sang for them, and they took me for the part. And the star, was supposedly, of course, the great baritone Lawrence Tibbett, who plays Germont. And I was very beautifully coached and guided by Fausto Kleber, conductor, and Herbert Graf was the stage director.
Tibbett, what was the voice like in person? For example, how did it compare in size to the voices of some baritones who came later?
Well, since I really wasn't that aware of the size of voices at that time, and Tibbett was well past his prime, all I remember is that he was very kind to me. He was not in great voice. In fact, there is a tape of that broadcast at the museum, at the CBS Museum, the Broadcast Museum, and I have never seen it, but I've been told about it.
Well, one of our listeners, Eli Jacobson of Brooklyn, phoned in to say her Traviata on NBC and Dialogues of the Carmelites both are at the Museum of Broadcasting. The Traviata is superbly acted, as well acted as Teresa Stratus's, and very well sung. And Eli Jacobson asks, why no European career? More, was there resistance to you because you were an American? Did Bing, for example, keep doors closed on that account? And lastly, Mr. Jacobson asks, when was TV first lip-synced?
Lip-synced?
Yeah.
Not during my period. Everything I did was live.
And I tenor in Traviata?
Brooks McCormick was the original tenor. Now, I did that. The one that I know about at the museum was done on CBS. That was the earliest televised opera that I was in, and about the second or third telecast. Now, I did another Traviata for NBC years later with Johnny Alexander, and Igor Gorin was the baritone. So I don't know which one he's talking about. I'm talking about the first one I did. And may I say to this gentleman, no doors were closed to me. The only doors that were closed were my own. I mean, I can't help it. I think it was Diana Barrymore who wrote a book called Too Much Too Soon. That's the story of my life. But here I am. I'm still in the prime of life. I'm the mother of 2 beautiful daughters. I have a husband. And I have a whole life ahead of me, which a lot of opera singers cannot say. And certainly I have sung with more people who have passed on than a lot of women my age.
Tibbett, did he attempt to seduce you? He was famous for that kind of thing.
No, he didn't, but he was... I only have positive things to say about him, and there are plenty of singers whom you would never think about who did try to seduce me, but I won't mention their names because there are families out there.
You've ruined Stefan's life.
No, but those of some listeners
Less
may
likely
be.
persons, I must say.
Well, what about being an object of desire as a teenage star in show business?
Well, that was a very difficult position to be in, but for, I would say, the first 20 years of my life, I didn't encounter any difficult situations with men trying to seduce me or put me on the casting couch. I got all these engagements by my talent and by having this woman manager shield me from everything, and based on my talent and probably my age. For instance, when I did that Traviata with Tibbet, the whole world was open to me. I had calls from Mr. Bing.
Really?
Oh, yes. I had calls from Mr. Laszlo Halas, who was the director of the New York City Opera at the time, at the City Center on 55th Street. I received a contract and a letter from Samuel Shatsanov, who represented RCA Victor, as a result of that one telecast. I had everything open to me, and frankly, the truth of the matter is that I really wasn't ready for all of that.
In what way were you not ready?
Well, Mr. Bing had me sing on the stage of the Old Met, and he said to me, came up on the stage, and he said that he had seen me in the Traviata, and of course, Fausto Clavo was, he loved me, and he really wanted me to get into the Met. And he said when he saw me as Violetta, he thought that I was ready to sing a leading role at the Met. But after hearing me in the house, he felt that I needed some vocal work and that he would like me to study with Elizabeth Schumann, great singer, an exponent of the head voice, which I sorely needed because I had been singing so heavily for my particular voice. And he also told Miss Nicholas and me that he would want me to curtail my activities, which were abundant. I was singing all over the country. I was earning quite a lot of money. I was singing an operetta, doing things like Notte Marietta and The Firefly and the Rio Rita and the Muni Opera, and anyway, that was what he said. On the other hand, I had an outright offer from Laszlo Halas to do Princess Ninetta in The Love of Three Oranges, to sing Zerlina, to do Michaela, to sing Liu in Turandot, to sing Musetta, and he wouldn't restrict anything that I was going to do. So between Emmy and me, we decided to take the New York City Opera offer, and that's what I did.
Some years ago, I did some TV, Italian TV, with a woman who at that time was somewhat famous, but not nearly as famous as she's become since, Isabella Rossellini. She was hosting a program called L'Altra Domenica, the Italian 60 Minutes, 4 hours long. I sang, and she interviewed me. Rosina Wolf, my late mother, also sang. In any event, the picture of Elaine Malbin I'm holding here somehow is evocative of a very young Isabella Rossellini. There's something, if anything, still more bewitching about the eyes. There's more delicacy, forgive me, Isabella, than she has. A shyness. The expression is very delicate, altogether bewitching. Elaine Malbin. So, you feel now that you weren't ready for all this. How did you feel then?
I think that I always felt not quite ready. I think for my whole life, I've always felt not quite ready.
How come you rejected Bing's advice?
I think it was an ego thing that I had been accustomed. I'm a very headstrong person. And I think that I didn't want him to tell me that I couldn't do this and couldn't do that. And I was already a star. I think I had that complex. I already felt that I was a star and that I didn't want to give anything up. And perhaps I was a little afraid of what I might have gotten into at the Met. You know, at that time, the singers whom he did finally take in on those kind of small part contracts included Roberta Peters, a girl named Genevieve Warner, Paula Lenchner. It was just about that time. It was his first season at the Met, by the way. Who knows what would have happened to me there? If I really should have not taken his offer, but I should have pursued the operatic road and gone back, just like people like Callas and other singers who did not take the first offer they got at the Met and came in under their own terms. But I had so many different roads that I was following. I went into musical comedy. I was singing on television. I even eventually did some supper clubs, which I really regret having
Why?
done. Who knows? Don't ask me. I don't know. Maybe because I wanted to earn the money.
No, but why do you regret it?
Why do I regret it?
Yes.
Because I think basically I am an opera singer, and you know what I feel? I feel in my next life I'm going to be like a Maria Callas. That's what I should have been, because I have the same kind of temperament, the same passion, the same kind of a mind. As a matter of fact, I have had always a tremendous empathy for her. I understood her. I understood her life and why she gave up that fabulous career for the love of this Greek person whom she really ruined her whole life over. I was very similar to that, but I didn't have as great a career as Callas. But I also had the same kind of temperament and feeling for music.
I gathered then that you were lonely, haunted, tormented,
Somewhat.
love-starved.
Something like that. Something like that.
Love-starved, with men swarming all over you. How could it have been otherwise? You still look yummy enough for yum-yum. Yet you were love-starved. None of them appealed to you? Or you thought they'd get in the way of the career?
I didn't think about it that way. I think it had nothing to do with men. I think it has to do with the childhood that I had, which I really won't go into too much. But the fact that I had been singing and more or less taken away from my family when I was 13 years old, basically. Once I had this singing career, I never looked back. But I missed a lot in my life, and that was very hard to throw off.
Your mother was ill,
Yes,
I believe.
that's correct.
And she died early.
Yes.
Traumatic? Or-
Very, very. As a matter of fact, when my mother died, I didn't want to go on singing, whatever that meaning may be. I don't know what that was about. But I did go on singing because that basically was what I had in life. But it didn't seem to satisfy me for whatever.
Cancer? Is that what she...
Yes.
Was it gruesome?
For her, it was very gruesome. And I think for a child who watches it, it is too. But I sort of put it in the back of my head.
Singing didn't satisfy you. Rudolph Bing once remarked that if none of the opera houses had any money, the Sutherlands, the Nielsens, the Vickers, and so forth, would all keep right on singing, because they have to, for the joy of it. But somehow singing didn't satisfy you. Was it that you didn't find it physically exhilarating, that you didn't find it emotionally gratifying?
I think it has to do with the gratification emotionally, but I must have loved doing it because I did certainly do it for a long period of time.
You characterize yourself as emotionally not very different from Callas. And yet this emotion that you had inside of you and were able apparently to give to the public didn't satisfy you. For me as a singer, I find that very odd, because I think usually we get off on the physical and emotional parts of singing more than our listeners do, whether or not they get off on it. That's what keeps us going. For many of us, that wasn't you at all.
I guess partly it must have been. I kept doing it.
Do you think you did it then because, as you said earlier, of the power, because of the momentum of the career, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Huh.
Perhaps.
The game of it, making this big career, leaping to the top and staying there?
I think that may have had something to do with it, yeah. Actually, it was very difficult for me. the life of an artist is when you're a young person. Is, as you know, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for anyone. And I think that I resented that. I had no idea, first of all, how difficult it is for most people to have a great career, because this was sort of thrust upon me. So therefore, I couldn't possibly appreciate it. Now, I know young singers who just keep trying. In fact, I heard an interview the other day with this girl, Sharon Sweet, is that her name? She said she made 150 auditions before she got a single job.
Sitting where you are, Cheryl Studer told us a similar story.
Well, I never experienced that. I mean, if I had it all to do over again, I probably would think very differently.
City opera under Laszlo Halas, or Halash, I've heard both pronunciations. One hears pros and cons. There were those who loathed him. He was much hated. He was accused of all kinds of nefarious things. And yet, Marty Sokol, in his book about the city opera, portrays Halash as the real hero there. And many feel that Halash is being dubbed